We are going to restart the meeting here. Moving on to item 7B, I'd like to welcome an ensemble cast. We have Economic Development Manager. Is that still the right title? It is. That's too bad. All right. I'd like to welcome Ben, City Center Program Manager Sarah Cho, City Engineer David Mach, and PFD Executive Director Janet Pope. Thank you for coming. What do you have for us?
Well, thank you, Council President. We have before you this evening an introduction to a proposed development agreement between the city and the Public Facilities District to help guide their redevelopment of their 13-acre campus that is anchored by the Lynnwood Event Center. This is a project that I've been working on with Janet I checked my calendar for 2 years. So we are very excited to be in front of you today to begin to provide you with an overview of what is proposed to be addressed within this development agreement to guide the master plan, and some of the important steps and decisions for the city that are part of that agreement. This will be the first of a couple of meetings that we will have with you and with the Planning Commission. There's an opportunity for them to provide some feedback related to the development agreement. We will also be having 2 public hearings for those of you who may recall the process for development agreements, and that'll be occurring later in the year. So with that, I had asked Janet to join us this evening to really recap and remind all of us what is the master plan project for the PFD, and I can't think of a better spokesperson for that than the executive director.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you so much. This development agreement is a significant milestone for the district and our partnership with the city in creating the heart of Lynnwood City Center. So I wanted to provide a quick historical recap and why this development agreement is important. The city of Lynnwood created the Lynnwood Public Facilities District in 1999. And PFDs are sanctioned by the state and established by a county or city to provide community and economic benefits, from museums to sports facilities to cultural venues to aquatic parks and to convention and event centers. And so the existing event center opened in 2005 as the Lynnwood Convention Center. We celebrated our 20-year anniversary this year. And during the 4 years of construction development, it was scaled back from being a larger building to save costs. So while it has delivered a significant amount of economic impact to the city of Lynnwood, over $200 million, it is still short of its economic impact potential. So there was a lot of wisdom at the original time of development in the acquisition of land around the event center, totaling 13 acres, and the intent of contributing to the future Lynnwood City Center. What has been missing for a lot of our history, though, is the community benefits that this building could bring. And so there is so much opportunity for our entire property to help be the catalyst for what we have learned in city surveys and our own surveys, what a lot of people have stated of what they want more of in Lynnwood. More arts, more culture, more entertainment, more walkability, sustainability, and housing that is affordable to our residents. So as I've learned from talking to other public facility districts in and out of our state, our assemblage of property is unique in an urban area, and its redevelopment is a shared opportunity to use this land for its highest and best use. So the development agreement is a codification of all these shared opportunities. One of today's leading business development thinkers, Gary Hamel, said, "You can't use an old map to see a new land." The development agreement thoughtfully activates decades of aspirational placemaking into intentional development. It is our new land use roadmap. So, for example, intentional is the ring road that has been planned for decades that the district will dedicate to the city to improve the city center grid system for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. Intentional is the expansion of the event center to add larger conventions for greater economic benefits, hosted ticket events such as comedy shows, concerts, and other entertainment, along with producing free public programming. Intentional is the go from gray to green, turning the acres of asphalt into landscape public plazas, a central lawn, a closed-off festival street, dotted specialty gardens and seating nodes, and likely a downtown dog park. The city staff in Development and Business Services, Public Works, and Park and Recreation have been very intentional in crafting a development agreement that supports city center planning efforts and allows flexibility to surprise and delight as the heart of Lynnwood City Center. And as Ben said, we've been working for 2 years, meeting weekly for at least an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours every week. And we tested that. So I mentioned our polling earlier. In July 2024, the district commissioned a professional poll of 300 Lynnwood registered voters to reaffirm the aims of the development agreement supported by the Lynnwood community. 70% were supportive of the master plan and its vision, with a quarter of those identifying as definitely supportive of the project that is codified in the development agreement. So this means that the foundations of the development agreement are accurately representing years of contemplation, community engagement, urban and growth management goals, expanding tourism and economic development, all within an urban area that intentionally celebrates everyday use and play. So there is so much more that I could say, and you know I have, but I won't. As you get into the details, I'm available to answer any related questions. And with Lynnwood's regional light rail, connectivity, and a livable, walkable city center underway, this is the right time for this transformational redevelopment, and I appreciate your time and review.
Thank you, Janet. I can't even imagine saying it any better than that. It really speaks to a community vision and how this project can be a catalyst for one of the city's top strategic goals, which is to realize the vision of City Center as a true urban experience that can be enjoyed by the region and by our own residents. So before we get into the details of this development agreement, I just wanted to do a quick overview about what is a development agreement and how this particular development agreement meets the criteria that is set out in both the RCW and in the Lynnwood Municipal Code. First, a development agreement is an agreement by which property owners and the city can agree upon specific development regulations that will apply to a specific development over the course of a given period of time. This type of approach most often works best with developments that are to happen over a number of years and phases that have certain complexities related to that phasing, either in terms of size or time, or that they involve new infrastructure, or that they are sufficiently different related to current code that it warrants adopting some changes to code in order to allow the project to proceed and fulfill the larger vision that guided those regulations. A development agreement is a legally binding contract between the city and the other party. It identifies expectations and requirements in order to move the project forward. Development agreements also can be mutually amended by both parties if both parties, of course, are in agreement. The criteria in the municipal code for a development agreement has 5 points to it. Number one, is the project proposed consistent with the comprehensive plan and any applicable sub-area plan? In the case of this agreement with the PFD, the proposal advances both the comprehensive plan's economic development goals and the City Center Alderwood sub-area plan, both adopted by council. Provides a public benefit in keeping with the criteria. The public benefit we've identified is placemaking and art, economic benefits, public infrastructure, open space, and affordable housing. Is it in the public interest? This plan implements the Economic Development Action Plan that was adopted as Councilmember Escamilla had identified for us last week in a different conversation. It's been a while, but it still holds as a guiding document for us. Is it not in a single-family zone, which of course it is not. It's in the city center zone. And then finally, is it consistent with the purpose of development agreements? And in this case, as we've highlighted at the start here, it provides increased certainty about the scope and timing of the project for both the developer, in this case, the PFD, and for the city. So with that, I'm going to now turn our presentation over to Sarah Cho, and she is going to walk us through a number of the 16 topics that we have covered through this development agreement. David Mach is going to cover some of the others within those 16 topics related specifically to the road improvements and the utilities envisioned for this project. Sarah?
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, council members. As Ben previously mentioned, the city and the PFD has been working on this development agreement for a little over 2 years. So what you're seeing in this development agreement summary is 2 years worth of conversations and meetings and negotiations between the city and the Public Facilities District. As you see, there's a wide range of topics that touches everything from allowable development capacities to building heights to road improvements, utilities, signage, mitigation, and noise mitigation. In the slides that will follow with this summary, we will walk through some of these in greater detail and talk about how they align with city policy and where we have allowed flexibility on the PFD's end. For allowable development capacity, the DA lays out 3 different scenarios for how this site could ultimately be developed, with a range of unit counts, commercial space, and hotel rooms. As you can see in the slide, you can see the current master plan, the high-density alternative, and the multifamily-only alternative. The reason why we have 3 alternatives proposed today is that this flexibility is what's needed for this development agreement, as it allows the Lynnwood Public Facilities District to adapt to market demand and also the financing conditions over time. It also ensures that any combination of development remains compliant with the City Center Planned Action Ordinance. The development agreement will vest the Lynnwood Public Facilities District to the current code provisions, but will allow modifications in use mix as the total intensity does not exceed the model thresholds for City Center. As we're looking at building heights for this development agreement, our city code establishes building height limits based on proximity to residential zones to protect views and access to light, specifically through a 60-degree view angle. While the city code allows for a 130-foot height limit from a 150-foot setback from a residential zone, the DA deviation will allow for a maximum height of 100 feet from a 100-foot setback from a residential zone. In exchange for a shorter building, the city is allowing the Lynnwood Public Facilities District to move the building 50 feet closer to the residential zone. The diagram on the slide shows that this deviation has no change in the view angle of 60 degrees as required in our code, and this deviation reduces both the setback and maximum height, but still maintains the view angle while increasing development feasibility for multifamily development at around 7 stories. Alternatively, for minimum heights, currently our city center code does not allow any buildings that are under 3 stories, but we made an exception in the development agreement where we will allow 1-story jewel box style retail buildings in the event center block that will create high impact and unique public facing spaces near the event center. These types of uses fulfill the city's intent by enhancing the vibrancy and placemaking, even though they fall below the minimum height standard of 3 stories. So you can see some examples in the slides where we've included Katanda, which is at Alderwood Mall. We also have Salt and Straw, and then that's the Totem Lake property there. That kind of shows the difference of the jewel box at one level next to the multifamily and mixed-use development surrounding. Next, for ground floor use, a key principle within the city center zone is ground floor activation. Our city code requires that ground floor uses must consist of occupiable space, except when structures parking occupies the ground floor, with about 60% of building frontage facing a street must consist of occupiable space. In the development agreement, we defined active space to include a wide range of retail and service-oriented businesses. This ensures that the street-level environment is lively, engaging, and pedestrian-friendly. Within the development agreement, the deviation is focusing on prioritizing intensive use, which requires less demand for other sides of the building. The DA allows the Lynnwood Public Facilities District to provide structured parking to occupy the ground floor, provided that the ground floor facing street frontage consists of 65% of active use, 60% of occupiable space, and 20% of occupiable space, as shown in the diagram on the slides. Modifying the ground floor use requirement will allow the Lynnwood Public Facilities District to activate the interior of their property, which is anchored by the existing event center and a private road network that is intended to promote a high volume of pedestrian activity while ensuring that the exterior of the site that is ringed by the new public right-of-way includes a balanced ratio of structured parking and occupied space on the ground floor. This flexibility in the development agreement does not actually reduce the overall ground floor activity within the city center, but it actually inverts and intensifies the requirements of the city along with private roads rather than public streets within this master plan. Furthermore, this allows the district to prioritize areas that are expected to experience the highest levels of pedestrian and retail activity with the greatest level of requirement and appropriately provide back-of-house functions for the event center in areas that are expected to receive the least amount of pedestrian activity. Regarding our city center design guidelines for the event center expansion, the event center expansion is currently subject to our city center design guidelines, which focuses on elements such as transparency, materials, street-level features, and pedestrian scale. The development agreement will allow a deviation that is allowing limited deviations to help achieve the intent of the city center guidelines while recognizing that the event center is a unique structure in and of its own and it's already existing within our city. The deviation currently proposes flexibility in the materials over the loading dock of the event center, flexibility in the entrance spacing and orientation requirements due to building massing and site constraints of the event center, removing some of the transparency requirements on the east facade of the event center due to the functional requirements for the loading dock area, and allowing alternative compliances in areas where canopies at street level weather protection may not be feasible at the event center. Even with these deviations from our guidelines, we believe we are providing flexibility that is needed for the event center, but we are still preserving the overall design intent and ensuring that the building remains an attractive and functional public asset. For signage, we went back and forth with the Public Facilities District on what they would like to do with their property, and ultimately we decided that the Lynnwood Public Facilities District will prepare a master signage program to guide tenant and event signage throughout the site. The development agreement will allow administrative flexibility from the city for elements like murals, freestanding signage, wall signs, and projecting signs. And these are important to the branding and wayfinding in this mixed-use redevelopment project. The master signage program is currently not finalized between the city and the PFD, but it is intended to establish base parameters for what would be allowed in a master signage program. This would be reviewed administratively with city staff before it is fully approved and implemented. We are also continuing to discuss items such as naming rights and gateway signage with the Lynnwood Public Facilities District. Regarding our 1% open space requirement within our city code, the development will dedicate at least 1% of their site to publicly accessible open space. The Event Plaza and Woodruff Street will more than satisfy the requirements and offer valuable community gathering places within the master plan. The Lynnwood Public Facilities District is currently proposing a little over 26,000 square feet of open space/public plaza, which exceeds the 1% requirement of 15,600 square feet. For our parking improvements, we discussed for special events that we would be extending the allowable distance for off-site parking from 1,000 feet to half a mile. This reflects the urban context and leverages nearby shared parking resources adjacent to the existing event center. The development agreement will also permit surface parking during phase construction, as they have different phases throughout the project, recognizing that structured parking may not be financially feasible right away. Eventually, permanent structured parking will be delivered at the end of the project.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to turn it over now to David Mach, the city engineer, who will walk us through the road and utility improvements, and then he and I will speak more specifically about the proposed ring road project that the city would take on to build as part of this project. David?
Thank you, Ben. So many years ago, when we started planning the city center, some of the early documents said that we really needed to break up the mega blocks with smaller grid kind of streets. And one of those, what we've been working on for years now, is the future 42nd Grid Street project. But another is the 194th extension across the north side of the PFD property. And with that also, that's the lighter blue that's on the current drawing. And then also the north-south connection, which we're calling the future 38th. So the two blues combined are what we call the ring road, which would become a public street. So it'd be dedicated, the right would be dedicated to the city. The city would be responsible for designing and constructing the ring road. And then the remainder of the streets there will all be private streets and be the something happened. Become the responsibility of the PFD. So maybe I could talk through the road a little bit. On the south side of the roadway, there where the blue intersects 196th Street, that would be what we call a right in, right out intersection. It would not be signalized with a traffic signal. And then on the north side of the ring road, where it intersects 36th Avenue, there would be a new traffic signal installed at that location, a fully actuated traffic signal. And currently, there's a traffic signal located about at 195th there on 36th. That would change. So no longer will you be able to drive east-west across the PFD site. That would be converted into a service entrance there. The other thing I wanted to mention is the road, the ring road. We will be putting in sidewalks on one side. So basically on the 38th, the dark blue on the east side of the roadway, the PFD side of the roadway, and then future redevelopment as it happens further to the west, adjacent to it, then would add sidewalks on the west side. So that would be a two-lane roadway, curb gutter, and sidewalk on the east side initially, with extra sidewalk added later with future redevelopment on the west side. And then as you come around the corner, there's a hillside there, so it would be some retaining walls that would need to be constructed and vegetated for the buffer. And then also we would have sidewalk on only the south side of 194th, the lighter blue color, because there are no driveways or any buildings on the north side. So that kind of summarizes the road improvements. If we could skip to the next slide, please. This now is rotated on us, so north is now to our right. 196 is on the left. And so what I wanted to point out here and this one's our stormwater. Sorry. My eyesight's not as good as it used to be. So the way this would work would be the road itself would have its own stormwater system that would be a public stormwater system. There's a high point about where the turn in the ring road is, and water would drain down to the south with a detention system under the road someplace near 196. And also it would drain to the east with a detention system somewhere underneath the roadway near 36. And that would be all maintained by the city's maintenance and operations teams. There'd be a public stormwater and detention water quality systems. And then the remainder of the site for the buildings and for the private streets, they would have their own separate detention systems that are independently maintained by the PFD. Let's move on to the next slide, please. This shows the water plan. Kind of similarly to what I described with stormwater, there would be a new water main installed underneath the ring road by the city as part of the road project. And that would connect at 196 on one end and 36 at the other, providing a new looped system for not just the PFD, but also future redevelopment that would occur to the west. And then any interior streets would have their own private water systems in there. And that's similar to what we've done with other developments, is having kind of a public water and then the private water systems. And then let's move on to the next slide. This is showing our sewer. It's a little different than the water just because of topography and the orientation of the buildings. The sewer would actually run down the new north-south private street instead of down 38th. And an easement would be dedicated to the city for that to be a public sewer system. And the city would maintain just that middle core. And then the remainder branches and twigs, if you will, would be maintained by the PFD. And I believe that summarizes that, unless Ben or any others would like to add to that part.
No, I think that covers it. I wanted to just speak here about another important factor that we've tried to address in the development agreement, which is a phasing plan. So what this really entails is an effort to reach agreement between the two parties to understand better both the timing and the phasing in terms of which steps of development would go first. And this is important to understand, particularly if the city's going to be involved in developing and building out that ring road, to understand how that project would interact and integrate itself with other construction that might be happening in different phases of development. So here we have what we've determined or have labeled the baseline phasing. This is a case where in this scenario we would have the ring road be built first and then the multifamily, and then that development would be followed by the event center, structured parking development, and the retail plaza, and then all of that development followed by the hotel that is considered part of this project. The modified phasing plan reflects an alternative approach of the sequence of development, whereby we would see a partial demolition and a partial build out of the ring road to provide access for the multifamily development that would occur first in advance of the full build out of the ring road. That partial build out of the ring road would be actually completed by the PFD or a developer of that multifamily, and in turn the city would reimburse them for the value of that improvement that they had done in advance. Then following the build out of that partial road and the multifamily, it would be followed by demolition and any environmental cleanup that is necessary. There is a environmentally brownfield contaminated site near a former dry cleaner. It's a well-known site. The PFD has done extensive research and engineering, and they have a very strong understanding of what is needed to clean that up. That would be cleaned up in advance of the city taking over that property, that right-of-way, in order to build the ring road. And we've had some very constructive conversations about how to sequence that work. And then for phases 3 or 4, it would come back to what you see there in the original baseline, where the event center and the parking garage would follow, and then to be followed in turn by the hotel development. Now, you can imagine we've tried to identify here 2 possible alternatives. Both of them are likely alternatives. However, within the agreement, we're allowing for administrative approval by the city, by the DBS director, to confirm any changes related to those 2. You can imagine different circumstances where, for example, there could be a change in whether and how the hotel goes, or other permutations to this schedule that we haven't even thought of yet. So I wanted to provide a brief overview here, but then I'm going to ask David to fill in on some of the details here related to the ring road. And as David identified, this would be the access road that would also serve as a future connection for an arterial, a minor arterial through this area. That was envisioned for quite some time as part of the overall transportation plan for a city center. And as I've identified, the city would be responsible for the detailed design of the road, and then the PFD and the city would coordinate our efforts to concur on the overall design as we would go through the design process. And David, do you want to pick up from here, or would you like me to continue?
I think, Ben, if you're okay with it,
Yeah.
I can always add.
You bet. That'd be great. Thanks. So we have a cooperative construction agreement that would be a follow-on agreement to the development agreement, whereby we would confirm the details for the construction of the road. To be clear, the city would be obligated to build this road only when funding was secured. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And as I noted earlier, we have both a baseline phasing plan, that's where the city comes in and builds the whole ring road at once, or we have a modified phasing plan where a portion of it gets built by the PFD or another developer, and then the city comes back in and finishes the rest. We also have identified a basic sequence of steps with the PFD within the development agreement by which they agree to convey to the city permanent right-of-way easements to the city so that we can actually build this road. That has substantial monetary value. And under existing code, the PFD would receive a credit against a transportation impact fee that otherwise development would have to pay. So within our transportation impact fee ordinance, where we've identified and designated roads that we want to build, if a developer provides that land for free, then that value of that land towards that infrastructure, towards that road, can be counted against the transportation impact fee they would otherwise pay if they weren't providing that property for the right-of-way. They would also provide an easement for retaining walls that would be necessary along the hillside there that you may recall is back in that northwest corner of the site. Those retaining walls, new ones, would have to be built as part of the new road. And then as well, the city would take over and hold responsibility for the maintenance and repair of those retaining walls. And then the landscaping around the road and along that hillside would be the responsibility of the PFD. Next slide. So this breakdown for our proposed ring road financing hopefully looks familiar to the council, because this is largely the same financing structure that we proposed as part of the tax increment financing ordinance that the council passed back in May. And so what we are currently looking at to pay for this project is we feel fairly confident that this project will score really well with the Transportation Improvement Board grant process. We've confirmed that because we needed to make sure that certain unique details of this road would still pass muster, and we've received feedback that staff that if we were to apply, the basic components of this project would meet that criteria. So our plan would be to target that in 2026 for an application for roughly $5 million. And then a second tier of funding for this project would come from tax increment financing. We estimated at that time that there would be roughly a $10 million contribution from that source. And that, again, as I had mentioned, improvements related to that process, also potentially advancing some funds for an early launch of design from the PFD would be eligible for reimbursement. And then we have approximately right now $3 million we anticipate would come from the city. Now, if the project cost is greater than $18 million, and $18 million was our very, very early estimate of what this project would cost, then we'll revisit the project and cooperatively work with the PFD on working to address any gap. Now, we don't know if there will be a gap. We don't quite know if, for example, it's possible that this project would be less than $18 million. There's a lot of variables at play. One of the goals as we move forward, should the council approve the development agreement, is that given where we are with other project demands and with project management staff, Public Works, the PFD has agreed that they would loan the city the funds to accelerate the process for moving the design of the ring road to 30%. 30% design is enough design where you can come back and do a fairly reliable cost estimate as to what it's actually going to cost. So it's really important for us to try and get that going. And if we reach that agreement and then we move forward with that loan arrangement, then at a point where the city moves forward with construction of this project, at that point we would reimburse the PFD for that earlier loan to jumpstart. We could always pay them back sooner too. Next slide. The development agreement is the kind of the blueprint for all the other agreements that we would still need to reach in order to fully move ahead with construction of the ring road. There needs to be a ring road financing agreement between the city and the PFD that relates largely to the early loan for early design that I mentioned. We'd have a cooperative construction agreement. That's about how we're going to phase our collective efforts in order to move that project forward. There would be an environmental indemnity agreement to hold the city harmless related to any future claims related to the environmental contamination that is on a portion of the future right-of-way. We'd have a dedication agreement. Of course, that's the formal agreement by which the PFD would dedicate the property for the right-of-way for the ring road. And then there's a series of easements to be granted to the city from PFD termination of other easements that are on the site and any other real estate transactions. For example, there's an easement related to a water connection, I believe, to an adjacent property. So we would need to extinguish that easement and then have the PFD arrange for replacement of that service to that property through the other infrastructure that we've identified earlier here. Next slide. So there's a few other important items to wrap up the overview, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to roll us out.
Thank you, Ben. Ben previously mentioned some levels of maintenance that we have negotiated with the Lynnwood Public Facilities District. As you can see on this maintenance slide, the city will install and maintain the retaining walls that are needed on the northwest portion of the PFD property as part of the Ring Road project. Additionally, the landscaping that will be installed in this area, the PFD will also install and maintain the landscaping, including all of the street trees. This actually worked out pretty well for both parties, as the PFD can provide a higher level of service for the maintenance of the street trees and landscaping, while the city takes on the maintenance of the retaining walls. Next, we have addressed noise mitigation with the Public Facilities District. The PFD must comply with the conditions of the environmental noise assessment in order to host amplified events, such as outdoor concerts, movies, and festivals. Part of their development agreement is with the intent of expanding their existing event center square footage and also bringing more events onto the public space or the public plaza area to host some of those type of events. The PFD must also be able to mitigate for noise east of their property line. But we also have that the PFD must conduct an acoustic assessment review before a final certificate of occupancy is issued for their multifamily buildings in order to ensure that they serve as a physical barrier to the north of the PFD property. Additionally, we have discussed a sound monitoring plan, which will install systems throughout the property in the landscaped buffer along 194th. This will also look at sound engineers will be present at outdoor concerts with live monitoring and quieting systems. Additionally, for any outdoor events, the PFD must obtain a special event permit from the city, which will allow the city and the PFD to collaborate and to make sure that they are addressing all of the noise concerns in their property. And lastly, I'll pass it back over to Ben.
Okay, the final element here is the process envisioned under this development agreement for making any future amendments. Number one, we've been using a system of letters of concurrence, so where we've needed to build up an agreement on some of these complex topics. Once we felt like we reached agreement, we would write it up and then sign off and then incorporate that into the larger agreement. And so we are contemplating continuing that, especially as it relates to, for example, any modifications to the phasing plan or any other minor adjustments to some of the basic terms. Then we have administrative amendments. This is where amendments could be done within a certain allowable amount by the city and PFD staff. And there would be a cap on, like, let's say, the maximum amount of change that would be allowed. And it would not, however, apply to, let's say, maximum allowable development capacity or net new trips. That's guided more by our existing planned action ordinance for all of City Center. And so any of those larger changes would have to go through a more formal process. And that more formal process would be one where staff would reach agreement and then move it forward to the city center and the PFD board for approval. Amendments to a development agreement, formal ones, have to go through the same process as the original agreement, based upon the guidance of the city attorney, which is fairly typical for development agreements. The process that I've outlined here is very similar to the process used for the Northline Village Development Agreement and the Lynnwood Place Development Agreement from years past. So we try to build upon that experience. Finally, at the onset of this presentation, I walked through or mentioned some of the future dates. Here they are spelled out for you. We are looking for our next meeting with the Planning Commission. We're going to do a briefing on August 14th. We are going to make notice for the public hearings to come, both before the Planning Commission and the City Council. We'll also be publishing SEPA determination. Then we have the public hearing September 11th for the Planning Commission. We will be back to you for another work session we propose on September 15th, taking your feedback, any other information that comes from the public, and addressing that. By that time, we will have the formal draft agreement also available for you to study in more detail. And then we follow up with the public hearing on September 22nd under this proposed schedule. We will have a board vote by the PFD, and then October 13th is our current goal for a city council vote to approve. And thank you for allowing us this amount of time to walk you through. We felt that we at least needed to touch on some of the details here, given how they are some changes from past standards that have been adopted by council, and we look forward to answering any questions.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. It's interesting seeing some of the new conceptual maps finally laid out in front of us. At this time, we'll entertain some questions, but let's try and keep it a little brief since we do have another item on the agenda still. Councilmember Binda?
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to come and present this. And this is just extremely exciting to see. I think earlier this year, before last year, when we had kind of gone and seen some of the plans and development and some of the things you guys were thinking about making this happen, seeing this again now, how it's laid out, it's really, really cool and awesome. And I'm a big fan of how the expansion is going to go. And I had a couple of questions in terms of, I see obviously it's supposed to have mixed housing and all of that. Is that including the apartments that are already there, or are there going to be added on mixed housing in the area of the event center itself?
Yeah, so in the proposal, it would be entirely new housing,
Okay.
and much in the style that we are currently seeing with, like, say, Ember or Enzo or Connect. But the design or layout of those apartments have to be in a certain way in order to provide some of that noise protection that we spoke of earlier.
Yeah, so would it be kind of over some of the retail or
Yes.
some other stuff that's there? Because when I'm seeing it here, it's kind of having it across the street, which I'm assuming are the ones that are already across the street over there.
I don't know that there's any apartments currently on the site. I'm pretty sure there isn't.
I'm thinking of the Lynnwood Convention Center, and across the street there's that one apartment complex that's right there. Yeah, City Center.
Yeah.
I thought that's what this was kind of showing. But is this
Yeah,
completely
no,
different?
City Center would be on the
What?
south side of 196.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
kind of what. So it's flipped the other way. Okay.
So these are both in like where the Chuck E. Cheese is. that
Yeah.
area.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I was kind of looking at it. I couldn't tell if it was that side or this side. So that's awesome to see. And also, I kind of saw on the page where we talked about minimum height requirements, and the photos in here are like obviously from like Totem Lake and et cetera in that area. Is that kind of like a model of kind of how you guys are seeing in a little bit of that area there with the height requirements, or is this just kind of photos you put there to kind of give that page a certain look? I'm curious in terms of what you guys are looking at. The stories, is it kind of modeling kind of what it is down in Totem Lake, or is it a little different?
Want me to take it?
Yeah.
It's similar mostly because of the cost of construction. So if you do a 5/2 building, you don't have to build it with steel, which is much, much more expensive. So most of the apartment buildings in the area are kind of that 5 stories over 2 stories of a concrete platform. So, but with us, we will have the concrete platform, we'll have the retail in front of it too. So that is similar to Totem Lake, very much so. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I walk by there to go to work every single day, and yeah, it's really vibrant. It's really cool. It's a good mixture of mixed housing and retail, and you have the theater right there, and yeah, I think
Have
that's
an event center though.
an event. Yeah. Ours would be cooler than theirs in that way. But yeah, I think that's really awesome. And yeah, other than that, I'm just really excited about this project, and I think it's gonna really definitely change the vibe of Lynnwood a little bit. And I'm really glad to hear about the noise protection, because I think that's something we're gonna get a lot of questions on as this is happening. And in the area I live right now, there is a lot of noise with the new construction of the apartment building across the street, and so it's definitely a problem in that way. So if we can get that information out there as we get this going, that this will not be something that's going to cause that kind of disturbance, that'd be awesome. But other than that, yeah, I have no questions. I'm just excited about this, so thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I want to commend the PFD and Janet, because one of the things they've done on their own accord is to reach out and have meetings with their neighbors, with the residential community that's directly behind there. They did so proactively, and they are making an effort to help keep them informed as to the progress of the project.
Yeah, and I think if I can recall, when you go down that way, it's more, I think there's a couple other retail buildings and then there's a couple apartments, so it's not like it's like housing, like, or like
There's residential right behind, and those are the folks that we want to make sure they're kept really
okay. I see what
informed.
you mean.
And we've had 2 meetings now, so they've all been very supportive, which is great, and we'll keep meeting with them.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much.
And Councilmember Hurst.
Thank you. A couple questions. When we talk about a similar process used for Northline Village, what's the we gave Northline Village a quarter of a century to build. What's the timeline for this to happen?
Thank you, Council Member. That's an important fact that I didn't share, and I apologize. 15 years is the proposed term for this agreement.
Okay, very good. And then, as far as the housing, is it going to be, is the plan to have affordable housing built within there?
We're using the term attainable for workforce housing, and at this point, we're in negotiations for a purchase and sale agreement with a developer who would make it 100% workforce housing.
So it's that 80%? Is that 60%?
60 to 80.
60 to 80.
AMI, yeah.
AMI. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Lutweiler.
Thanks. Well, one of my questions was about what's the timing of when we start making improvements versus a commitment to build. So is that the 15-year time frame that we were just talking about, right? And then I just wanted to clarify, we were talking about when will we know if the project costs exceed $18 million or not? And I think you said, was that at the 30% milestone for that design phase? Okay. And then maybe either you could answer it tonight or in a subsequent presentation, depending on what you think. But I was curious, when you talked about the baseline phased approach and you had at least one alternative laid out, is that something we should be thinking about, or that you were thinking about, on the costs incurred with handling it one option versus the other, and then revenue generation? I'm not quite sure the way that you structured it, I assume, was based on maybe a revenue model and a cost expense model that might vary. So I would just be curious to hear more about that, maybe at a later meeting, you know.
Yeah, just
But yeah, just what your thought process was there.
appreciate the question. Bottom line is, working with the PFD, they're looking for any way to really help launch and accelerate this project. One of those ways to do so would be to secure a mixed-use housing developer sooner than, let's say, we could design and build the road. And so we needed to accommodate that option and that opportunity for the district. So really, that's what that alternative phasing kind of envisions, if that were to happen. We wanted to make sure they had that flexibility. We did examine pretty closely. We had several meetings, and David had many good questions related to how do we actually practically make that happen. Janet has a very good consultant team as well, and so working together, we figured out a pathway where that could work in that circumstance, where they would build what we sometimes call a half road. They would do half of that development. They would need to do that anyway of some sort to provide access to that residential site. And then they would do it in a way that we could easily incorporate that into the overall design and construction of the rest of the project. So that's kind of what we were thinking about. And the financial benefit, of course, is to the PFD. If they can land that developer earlier, then it, I would say, improves your financial condition and momentum for the project.
The momentum, certainly, for sure, and it just shows the viability of all the things that can come next. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Escamilla.
Hey guys, thank you for your presentation. Great update. Super, super exciting. And excuse me if I missed this, but where are we at exactly on the design? Like what milestone right now?
So this all to get through this development agreement has been still what we're calling the conceptual design phase. So we are moving towards a schematic design phase, which, as you heard, will help with the costing and things. So that's slated to start early next year.
Okay.
So January.
Okay, so you guys are still on conceptual. Do you guys have, I know you have a board, but do you have like a stakeholder group or a separate, or have you guys been having like outreach? Or are you trying to just get something conceptual to then utilize the timeline that we were shown for more? I know your meetings are open, but for like bigger, a lot of people don't pay attention to that level. So you know what I mean?
So the community meetings, I mentioned the survey. That was one big thing. We'll be doing another survey early next year as well. And then, of course, really using our website, and there's a survey on the website, tell us what retail you want, tell us what you're interested in the property. So really trying to put those messages out there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. And do you have a date when you're closing the survey, I guess, to share with the community?
On the website?
And be open?
It's ongoing. The website's definitely ongoing, yeah.
Okay, so I was on the website and I was looking to see if there was a drawing, one, out of utter curiosity, and two, just to ask the question and provide feedback. It's very, very early on, but is there going to be like a playground or a toy or a water feature for the kids? I know it might be too early, but that's where my brain's going as mom.
Well, yeah, and as we've shared in some of these meetings with you folks, we're looking at, one of our retail spaces being a daycare. And then certainly with the housing, there would be, the equipment for the kids and things like that. And then some of that, as I mentioned, there's the dog park space, but some of that could be playground space as well. So making it as community interactive. I've often cited just the little stream of water that's outside the Mohi Museum down in South Lake Union, and how it's just mass crowds with this playing and this little trickle of water.
I know. I mean, it does take much to make the kids happy sometimes.
So that closed off street and what can be done with that, as well as the plaza when it's open for public spaces, has so much opportunity.
Nice. So it sounds like we still have definitely opportunity for everyone to do the survey and give
Oh,
feedback
100%.
as we're rolling this out to like get the bigger buy-in.
Yeah.
So no, that was it. Just I'm a drawing person, so I was like, ooh, is there latest and greatest drawing? Just to see inside. But no, I'm perfectly fine with where we're at and excited for the updates. Thank you.
We'll re-engage the architects again later this year and going into early next year, as well as civil engineers, and then you'll get the really cool designs.
Thank you.
Okay, any last comments? Councilman Decker?
So I was saving my questions so I didn't overlap with others, and that way everybody had a chance there. This was probably mentioned in a previous class that I slept through, but I'm not sure I'm aware of Transportation Improvement Board. What is the Transportation Improvement Board and who administers that?
Transportation Improvement Board is a state agency. It was established by the state to fund transportation projects. It's basically based out of Olympia. Most of their revenue comes from gas tax. And we have partnered with them on many, many projects over the time I've been here at the city. Some of the notable projects are we received a $5 million TIB grant on the Poplar Bridge project. We've received, I believe as well, $5 million on the 196th Street project. Actually, a very similar project in some ways was the new Costco, the ring road that was built around there. It was primarily funded by the TIB through a grant that we had received. And the city had done a very similar arrangement with the school district, who actually owns the land out there, not Costco. And we partnered with them through a development agreement, and the city designed and built the road with city funds and TIB funds.
The second part is the TIF funds, tax increment financing, $10 million. Over what period would that $10 million be generated?
Well, the TIF district has a 20-year time horizon, so that would be generated within that time. And
it's based on increase in tax value from when the TIF was created.
yes.
So in this particular area, I mean, property value goes up, so taxes go up. But until the infrastructure actually comes in and the buildings are built, you're not going to see a significant increase in value. So you're not going to see a lot of taxes here. So there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg for me here. You need $10 million to build it, but you can't get $10 million in TIF until you build it. So how are you going to do that?
You're going to bond for it.
Okay.
That's your bridge.
Bond it out. Okay. The $3 million from the city, when would the city need to cut that check?
So go ahead, David.
Yeah, the $3 million is a placeholder at this point. We're basing all this off an $18 million figure, and when we get to the 30% design, we'll have a much better idea of what the actual costs are. So at that point, we'll be able to pause, regroup with each partner of the agreement, and work through, say it comes in at $20 million. Well, how are we going to handle that? What if it comes in at 15 and we don't know? So at this point, let's say it is $18 million. So what I would anticipate that those funds would be primarily used during construction phase of the ring road portion. So initially we need to put together the funds to design the project. The property will be dedicated at no cost to the city, other than we may need to acquire some small takes for the traffic signal. And then the remainder of the project cost is in construction. So I anticipate that $3 million would be at construction phase, which I think at the soonest could be 2 years.
Would that be via bond also?
Well, we have different transportation revenues, so we would need to look at, this is all still somewhat fluctuating because we don't know when this project will be ready to go to construction and what our fiscal position will be at that point. But we have transportation revenue coming through real estate excise tax. We have transportation benefit district funds. We also have utility money that can help to pay for some of the stormwater and the water and the sewer, some of the sewer infrastructure too. So it's hard to answer your question, but there are funding sources for transportation infrastructure that we could potentially allocate toward that $3 million, that hypothetical $3 million.
Yeah, I'm understandably cautious about saying, hey, we're going to cut a check for $3 million in 2 years or 3 years. In 2 years, we'll be lucky if we've recovered from where we're at and where we're going to be for the next 2 years. So saying, yeah, we're just going to, magically come up with $3 million for this in a couple of years makes me very nervous. This is the type of thing these are the type of commitments that help dig us into a hole where we're at now. So I'm just very nervous about that. I get that you're going to be creative about where those funds come from, and it won't just be straight $3 million out of the general fund, but I'm still going to be watching that one. I'm concerned about the viability of the multifamily. That's the first thing. That's kind of the kickoff project there. We are seeing multifamily being built outside of the city instead of inside the city. We're missing some big projects that we thought were going to kick off. Obviously, we're missing some really big projects. That's part of the problem with our budget. So I'm concerned about the multifamily being the kickoff project here when the demand for multifamily in the city of Lynnwood seems to have waned over what we had been forecasting. So I'm not sure there's going to be demand for that. We'll skip that one. That's a lesser one. So under special event parking, you're asking to have the special event parking circumference for vehicles going from 1,000 feet up to 2,500, basically. Is that correct? 1,000 up to 2,500? When I looked at the map, the number's less important, but when I look at the map of what's encompassed by that, there's a very large residential neighborhood that will now fall. I mean, these are single-family homes, and you're now saying that those streets will be viable for overflow parking for events for the event center. I think you should be very careful and get out there and poll those residents and say, hey, are you okay with the PFD parking cars here when they have events up and down your street? I mean, it's going to be a major impact, not only in ingress, egress for people that live there, but also safety. You got a bunch of cars going, hundreds of cars going in and out of there in these tiny little neighborhood streets. There's a real safety issue there. So I think you should double click and get up there and say, hey, do you realize that if we agree to this expansion of parking, they're going to be parking on your street, and you need to be aware of that. And don't just assume they read the map and said, oh, yeah, that's... And my other question on that same one that I'll let you speak there is, it also encompasses a lot of businesses that are not part of the PFD in other parts of the city. Is the intent for there to be parking agreements so that people can then park? I mean, that's private property. You can't just say, oh, yeah, you can park there because it's within the 2,500 feet. So what's the intent? So two things. One, residential up north. Two, all those businesses that you're saying, this is within the parking radius for special events.
Yeah, thank you for that observation and that question. Those are incredibly important points. We, first and foremost, as part of special event parking, what the PFD envisions is exactly as you had suggested, is reaching agreement with the private owners of those parking lots in order to provide that parking. And this would be for special events. Those special events would be subject to a special event permit from the city. And a part of that permit requires you identify the parking. So we're not going to permit those events until we can see where that parking is going to occur via those agreements. You raised a really important point about parking in residential areas. That's a very sensitive topic. It's certainly not the intent of this proposal for that parking to occur. They would direct it towards these lots. There would be a very organized system for that. That said, that does not guarantee that people, for example, wanting to park and, let's say, not pay a fee for parking or something would park in residential. In other communities that have an event center that draw large grounds, you will oftentimes establish a residential parking permit program. I established one myself in the city of Kent to address this very same issue for the Showwear Center in downtown Kent, which is also immediately adjacent, a single-family neighborhood. And the concern you just identified was an important one for them. In that circumstance, we basically provided those parking permits for free for a period of time, up to a certain number of vehicles per household. My understanding is Lynnwood had a similar arrangement with a neighborhood to the south in years past. But we would be looking to explore how we would manage that so that that negative consequence wouldn't happen.
I know the area around the Edmund Center for Performing Arts has exactly this problem, and those neighbors get very disturbed.
Yeah.
Those people are, literally blocking driveways. They're right up to the curbs. People can't get in and out. There's huge safety issues. I think you definitely should get down there and talk to those neighborhoods and see what their experience has been. We want to make sure that our experience is not what that experience is around performing arts. That center draws 1,000, I don't know, was it seats 3,000 or something like that? I can't remember how many seats. 800? It's just, when I've gone there for concerts, there's just like no parking. The parking lot has very little space, and you do end up parking all over those neighborhoods. My final question is, we're proposing a lot of deviations around signage and some other things like that in order to enhance the PFD. Are we allowing those same deviations for other entities in the city like the mall that would really benefit from being able to have more flexibility in signage and such as that?
Yeah, so for example, the example you cited, the mall, it actually has, the zoning that the mall's in actually has more room and more flexibility for signage, similar to what the PFD is entailing. You may recall that we actually asked you to, and you did approve a smaller development agreement to allow a shopping center adjacent to the mall to have the same standards because those were too restrictive. Similarly, in this case, we take some guidance from what we've allowed around the mall, like monument signage and commercial signage, storefront signage, that sort of thing. What we are really looking for is something that is cohesive and that also communicates well what's there. It also recognizes that the signage that, for example, this is a unique facility, the event center. That very large sign that says Lynnwood Convention Center that's on the side of the building, that's unique to that building. And so similarly, recognizing the unique nature of this development and that building, we try to make that accommodation, but do so within the basic goals and guidelines of the signage program.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to extend the meeting.
Move to extend the meeting to the end of the agenda.
Great, do we have a second?
Second.
That's a lot of seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, say nay. Sure, the ayes have it. All right, anyway, any other comments before we close out this item? No, excellent. I'll just add that I really appreciate the scrutiny that Councilmember Decker's bringing up with this. There's so many concerns about a mega project like this, especially in a year like this one. And beyond all the math and the numbers, I really appreciate the amount of scrutiny you're giving to the noise. Just having all of those engineering attempts to make sure that these kinds of negative externalities don't just outflow into the neighborhoods. I think that tells us the amount of care you're taking with this project, and I'm excited to see where this goes from here. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.